We know of their deep belief in God, and we are confident that their struggle will succeed. That land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes and your mosques back again because your cause is right and God is on your side.
This means the Muslim Brotherhood, whether or not Nobel laureate Muhammad, this is a propaganda piece, obviously. Baradei ever served as fig leaf. The Brotherhood is, of course, a different kettle of fish from Iran's Ayatollahs, and Turkey shows that an Islamic-leaning government can be part of the liberal world, though Turkish Premier Recep Tayyip Erdogan once let slip the democracy was a tram you ride until you arrive at your destination, and then you step off. Actually, that's very true, because it's a con game, democracy. We've never had it, and it's not intended that you ever get it, actually. And the Club of Rome has pretty well said that too. They said it didn't work. And by the way, whatever the Club of Rome says is the law, because they're run by the big bankers who own you all. But it's quite amazing, as I say, when they go into this it's just a sudden uprising, over this price of food and fruit and all that kind of stuff. But you actually go further into the other articles. And then it says here, Egypt protests. El-Baradei tells crowd, change is coming. Right? So this is the headline. You see another handout. Because the media all works together to make sure that you get the wrong message, which they'll tell you is the right one. And who is El-Baradei, for instance? You do a little checking on him, you'd be quite surprised. The guy was an officer at the United Nations his whole life. So he's the guy that obviously they're going to set up to take over. But anyway, it says here, leading Egyptian opposition figure Mohammed El-Baradei has joined thousands of protesters in Cairo defying a curfew to demand President Mubarak stand down. So as I say, El-Baradei, Mohammed, is an agent of the United Nations. That's his employer. But he also, amazingly enough, belongs to another organization, if you look at it too. And it says here, crisisgroup.org. Look at that site. It's a non-governmental organization backed by the big foundations. And guess who's in it there? Brzezinski again, the same guy that was behind the Iran student uprising and the Orange Revolution when they sent thousands of US NGOs over with their orange scarves and placards and all the rest of it. So it's the same thing that's been going on right now in Egypt. But of course you're not supposed to think that or know that or even be aware that Brzezinski and the NGOs are all involved. And these articles are trying to make you think it's just communist Mohammedans, which is absolute rubbish. But as I say, this Mohammed El-Baradei not only belongs to this crisis group and has obviously done work for them for years, he also is an officer of the United Nations. But they won't mention that here. Anyway, it says, in the rest of the crowd in Tahrir Square, the Nobel Peace Prize winner urged patience, saying change is coming. In a 10-6 day of the protests, the army sent tanks into the square only to see them blocked by demonstrators, and Air Force jets and a helicopter repeatedly flew over the square, etc., etc. And then he gives his prepared speech. I bow to the people of Israel in respect. I ask, of Egypt in respect, I ask of you patience, change is coming in the next few days. However, the BBC's Jim Muir in Cairo said the former UN official did not attract the attention of the whole crowd, which contained other political factions as well. This is the one, obviously, that the US, Britain, and so on will back up, because he's part of their crisis resolution club, who actually, it's like doublespeak, tend to foment revolution inside countries with what they call soft power. This is the term they use, soft power non-governmental organizations that are all well organized and well funded, well backed, etc. Hi folks, we're back cutting through the matrix. The way the media presents news to us is to keep us thinking that things are just happening day by day and things come out of the blue, like this farce in Egypt that just suddenly materialized, and of course they're all squabbling as to what to do about it. Stuff like that. And of course nothing's further from the truth, because in the real world, with information technology and all the rest of it, the big boys at the NSA and everywhere else that has the same organization, know exactly what's coming up down the road. They keep a hold of all emails, all chatter on cell phones, and they know who's saying what, and even the hackers, of course, have been into the emails, as we well know. So there's nothing secret about what's happening. So nothing takes anybody by surprise except the general public. At least that's how it's presented to you. And that helps those who help bring on revolutions and so on, because you then wait for your government to do something about it. It gives you that, it makes you kind of want them to do something, just do something about what's happening here or there or whatever. But nothing is further from the truth. It's a big business plan in the world. And the one thing you always find with dictators who are chosen or created to be dictators by the Western agencies or powers, you always find it's a dodgy step to go, because you're their best pal as long as you have a function for them, but they'll dispose of you like so quickly if they have no more purpose for you in the world. And that's what we're seeing, it seems to be, in Egypt. I've already mentioned yesterday that the Institute for the Crisis Resolution and so on, to which Brzezinski and others belong to, also have the guy they're pushing to take over, it seems, Egypt, this Mohammed El-Baradei, involved. So they're both members of the same organization. They don't just go in to resolve crisis. It seems to be like doublespeak as always. They go in there and they actually help to get the crisis going with soft power. And I've been through articles a year ago on what soft power is from the United Nations, and from the reports put out by the US military and the reports put out by the Council on Foreign Relations. They actually refer to the armies, the massive armies of non-governmental organizations, as soft power. And they fund them to take off to different countries to help start off what appears to be a popular uprising, a revolution, to get a new system in. But everything is a con, you see, because we live under a bigger plan than all that, obviously. But here's the typical nonsensical news handout you get. It says Washington, it says, when President Obama unexpectedly won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009, you get that for blowing up people to pieces. That's why you get Nobel Peace Prize. One predecessor was quick to applaud his selection for the award. He said, I could not have thought of any other person that is more deserving of the Nobel Peace Prize than Barack Obama. Mohammed El-Baradei, then the Director General of the International Atomic Agency, said in a videotaped statement. He went on to praise Mr. Obama's commitment to restore moral decency to the lives of people around the world. I wonder I'd like to see the definition of moral decency. But on Sunday, Mr. El-Baradei, now a prominent face of the opposition on the streets of Cairo, and actually he's only one of many guys who are vying for power, but it's only one the media's been told to concentrate on, so that it'll be no shock when we find out he ends up being the boss. It was sounding a different tune. The American government cannot ask the Egyptian people to believe that a dictator has been in power for 30 years will be the one to implement democracy, El-Baradei told CBS's Face the Nation. He called the U.S. refusal to openly abandon President Hosni Mubarak of Egypt a farce. Mr. El-Baradei, 68, had a fractious relationship with the Bush administration. This is to make you think he's if Obama likes him, he's left-wing, so he's okay. This is all written this way, actually. That's how they do it. So they tell you he had a fractious relationship with the Bush administration, one so hostile that Bush officials tried to get him removed from his post at the Atomic Watchdog Agency. But as Egypt's powerful Muslim Brotherhood and the secular opposition on the streets of Cairo have increasingly coalesced around Mr. El-Baradei to negotiate on their behalf, the Obama administration is scrambling to figure out whether he's someone with whom the U.S. can deal. Now, if anyone can't see, it's already a done deal. Well, I can't help you, because this has been planned for probably a few years. They already had, I'm sure, their NGO agents in there, lots of cash behind them, getting the students ready and all the rest of them to start to protest. It says, since the protests in Egypt erupted, Obama administration officials have been trying to reach El-Baradei, but they have not made contact of Monday afternoon, a White House official said. I think that outreach is ongoing, said Robert Gibbs, the White House press secretary. Besides both winning Nobel Prizes, Mr. El-Baradei won his Peace Prize in 2005. Mr. Obama and El-Baradei both opposed the war in Iraq. Well, they always do, until they get into power, a position that tainted Mr. El-Baradei's relations with the Bush administration. Mr. Obama and El-Baradei spoke by telephone 3 times in the fall of 2009 as the nuclear agency director was finishing up his term, and the two men met in September 2009 at the United Nations, where Mr. Obama was hosting a nuclear security summit meeting. They talked about Iran's nuclear ambitions, a White House official said. So, it says they're all enthusiastic about him and all the rest of it, and he seems to be the right kind of guy, and can they deal with him, and all that kind of stuff. It says the only contention, and whether it's real or not, we'll never know until that guy's actually in, and I'll bet you anything he'll change his tune. But it says, but an interview last June with London-based Al-Quds Al-Arabi, Mr. El-Baradei called the Gaza blockade a brand of shame on the forehead of every Arab, every Egyptian and every human being. He called on his government and on Israel to end the blockade, which Israeli and Egyptian officials argue is needed to ensure security. During an IAEA Board of Governors meeting in June 2009, Mr. El-Baradei clashed sharply with Israel's representative over a Syrian reactor destroyed in an Israeli airstrike in 2007. An American cable from Vienna said that Israel had ignored advice not to criticize Mr. El-Baradei publicly, and in responding in kind, accusing Israel of violating international law. So they're all playing diplomatic games, it seems. But as I say, the whole thing is, it seems to be this is the guy that the powers that be want in, and he'll change his tune on some things, no doubt, once he is in, and that's how they get in, of course, like any other kind of politician. Now, Zbigniew Brzezinski, as I say, belongs to the same crisis resolution group, which is a misnomer because they foment crisis. Brzezinski has already said that he was involved with the demonstrations that occurred in Iran last year. And, of course, they used the soft power NGOs, flew them in, financed them, and he said he was involved. And I put up the link at the time where you hear him saying it himself. He was involved in that. So he's no doubt involved in this too. But it says here about Brzezinski, as President Jimmy Carter's National Security Advisor during the 1979 fall of the Shah in Iran, Zbigniew Brzezinski has dealt intimately with history-bending revolutions. He's been behind some, actually. After mass protests deposed the regime in Tunisia and later spread to the streets of Egypt and Yemen last week, Newsweek's John Barry talked to the Johns Hopkins professor about the way young people across the Arab world, many of them disaffected and disenchanted, are now connecting on the circuits of a new revolutionary age. God help them, because I tell you, if they get democracy, they'll be the same boat as Britain and elsewhere, where they're looted, plundered, and then sold off to the private sector. But they always fight for dreams, and that's all they get is dreams. But it's interesting, too, that Brzezinski also was a guy who helped foment the revolution, the first revolution against the Russians in Afghanistan. And I put the link up before. I'll try and drag it up tonight, where you actually hear him meeting with some of these people and saying, your war will be a holy war, a jihad. And sure it was. They kicked out the Russians in order for America to invade. It's quite a world we live in, the games these guys play, Zbigniew Brzezinski and others, because they no wonder they come out with books called, the grand chessboard and all that kind of stuff. These guys play chess with the world, but for geopolitics. And they're all Marxists, by the way, to boot as well. If you don't know what kind of system you're really in, it's a fascio-Marxism. Marxism grew and got backing from the very beginning of the richest people on the planet. And that's what the system is that they brought in elsewhere across the world. Anyway, he says a few years back he said a demographic revolution awaited the Middle East like a political time bomb. Has that moment come? This is during his questionnaire. Today we have somewhere between 80 million and 130 million young people around the world who come from the socially insecure lower middle class and constitute a community of mutual infection with angers, passions, frustrations and hatreds. These students are revolutionaries in waiting, he says. When they erupt at a volatile moment, they become very contagious. And whereas Marx's industrial proletariat more than a century ago was fragmented in local groups, today these young people are interacting via the internet. That means there's higher forces controlling them. That's what that means. He says they're actually transmitting techniques as major social movements long have. They think back to the upheavals in Central Europe a generation ago. Solidarity used slogans and colours. Solidarity, by the way, was actually a Marxist thing too that came out of, I think it was University of Aberdeen, way back in the 60s by the Marxists there. The more recent uprisings in Central Europe followed suit, the Velvet Revolution, the Orange Revolution, and again the Velvet and the Orange Revolutions were put, again these NGOs that were sent in with all the orange scarves and hats and placards and so on by the West. Everybody is imitating everybody, and today we see that young people in Cairo have clearly been watching what is happening in Tunis and have been energized to action. It was interesting too, I read that article where the wife of the president of Tunis had flown off with, I think it was a ton of gold or something. And it turns out they're in Montreal. That's what happened too when the NAFTA deal was going on, and Brian Mulroney and the president of the U.S. had said that, Salinas, I think his name was president of Mexico at the time, was the man to lead this unification of the Americas, and they were right behind him. And then next week, he ran off with the Treasury of Mexico. By the way, he ended up in Montreal as well for quite some time, and then he went to Dublin. And then the US and Canada had to spend about $50 billion to bail out Mexico. He wasn't touched, of course. Back with more after this break.